and form big groups and form big networks, you'd be able to make so much more noise and make so much more of a difference. So it's not tons of people here, but it's honestly really heartwarming to see people standing and listening and talking. So if you have got something to say, if you want to do a chant, obviously it's an open mic, jump on, but 1, 2, 3, 4, deportation no more. 1, 2, 3, 4, deportation no more. 1, 2, 3, 4, deportation no more. So thank you very much.
Deportation.
Alright, okay, sorry. Yeah, thanks very much for turning out to oppose this intensification of the hostile environment and deportation policy. Obviously, this is just, I think a better way of thinking about it is like, this is the next step, the logical next step in the system that's been developing and growing over the last 30 or 40, since the end of kind of decolonization really, or the beginning of decolonization. So it's part of a system of a number of different institutions. So it's about raids, it's about where police officers, border enforcement come into communities, snatch people, take people out of their communities, out of their families, out of their workplaces. It's about immigration detention centres. So these are like 10 or so prisons that are dotted around the country, often outside near airports or in the middle of like nowhere, like Warren Hall, used to be one which is about 40 minutes from Nottingham. It's about the asylum system in general, so asylum support system which takes refugees and asylum seekers out of the normal welfare system, gives them pittance, gives them nothing to live on, gives them housing that they have no control over where it is, where it's like taking them out of their community, the ability to access housing, welfare, the NHS even. They're being charged for basic healthcare. It's about the asylum hotels and barracks that have been springing up as kind of ways of housing people outside immigration detention, but like not allowing people to stay where they feel safe, where they feel part of their networks. It's about the Home Office itself. The Home Office itself is a culture which is there to undermine at every stage people in general, but people's ability to survive, to feel belonging. And it's incentivized. People are like got targets in the Home Office where they're incentivized to refuse people's asylum claims. So it's like, you know, if they accept someone's asylum claim, they're kind of like bullied and like kind of shown up in front of their colleagues if they accept people. The culture of the Home Office is appalling. It's been shown through the Windrush scandal that that's the case, and they will do anything they can to undermine administratively non-white, people of colours, working class people particularly, ability to stay in the UK. So supporting people and organisations to resist in whatever way we can is so important through immigration law. Immigration law is something which is like a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's the only tool through which people can challenge their targeting by the immigration system. On the other hand, it's a system which itself has been designed to undermine people's right to stay. It is built by the government. It's built by successive governments to delegitimise the right of people in the UK to stay, and that's been developed through Tory governments, and it's been developed through Conservative governments. The Conservative governments generally put the kind of hostile and like racist things up front. The Labour Party will oppose them, and then they will not overturn them when they get into government. Not only this, the Labour Party often accelerates things. They built detention centres, they built no recourse to public funds, they built asylum support system. They are just as part of this system as the Tories are. And I wouldn't be surprised if this kind of policy that gets off the ground, if it does, I wouldn't be surprised to see this Labour Party continue it and not oppose it. That means that we need to organise in a grassroots fashion against these systems. It means taking a look at Kenmure Street in Glasgow, and Evan Cook Close in Peckham this week, where communities have rallied around raids that have happened and become organised through community networks to respond when someone is being targeted by a raid, to physically to stop people being arrested, to de-arrest them. And I think it's that kind of collective organising, but also a kind of sense of collective joy at coming together to support, to underline the kind of belonging that people should have in our city and in our communities. That's all I wanted to say. My favourite chant is no borders, no nations, stop deportation. So let's do that. No borders, no nations, stop deportations. No borders, no nations, stop deportations. No borders, no nations, stop deportations. And yeah, thank you. This is an open mic, so if anyone wants to come and speak, that would be great to pass it on.
Yeah, just a couple of things. The idea of community, the idea of immigrants coming in and people treating them like an outsider. Then when they realise what they have in common, the needs, the loves, just to have food and shelter, and these people, yeah, you would be welcome there as well. If the shoe was in the other foot. But what I'm building up to here is one thing that the government didn't expect. Unfortunately, I'd already moved here by the time, but in 2020, and right next to my old neighbourhood in the south side of Glasgow, to find out that people found these refugees were being deported and went, no, that's my neighbour. I've known that guy for a few years now. No way are you taking him. And they got up at 6 in the morning, and one guy threw himself under the detention van and then started phoning round everyone that he knew that was within a 5-minute radius. And by 1 o'clock, the police couldn't move because the whole neighbourhood had came out. 1,000 people stopped that van from moving. And when they realised that they were powerless at that point and went, what can we do? He has to go. No, he doesn't. They don't. There were 2 guys and they stayed. They won. It might have only been for a day or so, but they won. This is the power that we actually have. There was a flight, I can't remember the details, there was a flight when the pilot found out that someone was being deported to a country that they'd left, that they would be, some horrible, medieval torture would happen to them. The pilot went, get another fucking pilot. That is the power that you actually have. There's times when people don't know what's going on, or they have to rely on, the Daily Mail or the Daily Mail Light, the Metro, and understanding what's going on, and they don't. And yet, if they actually knew for 1 second, they care. They do. As it was already mentioned earlier on, there was a minister locked up in Nazi Germany who had plenty of time to reflect, and when he finally got out, his poem was published. First they came for, and he acknowledged the mistake that he made was when the first person was locked up, he should have said something, because by the time they got round to locking him up, there was no one left to stand up for him. So let's learn from history and not repeat it. So, anyone else? Okay. Chance.
7, 8.
Britain is a racist state.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Deportations no more.
5, 6, 7, 8.
Britain is a racist state.
Power to the people. No human is illegal. Power to the people.
No human is illegal.
Power to the people.
No human is illegal.
Beautifully done. Okay.
Who have disappeared, they've been sent back to their countries where it's not safe. Lesbian women that have been sent back to Uganda, Kenya, Nigeria, victims of domestic violence. Did you know that domestic violence is not a legitimate reason to seek refuge under the Refugee Convention? Because the Refugee Convention, or the British government anyway, states that you should be able to go to the police in your country of origin and report that violence. A good friend of mine, Joy, who together we fought against her deportation, but when she was a victim of domestic violence, I'm not going to say which country she was from, because otherwise it might seem like I'm just targeting that country. We know that domestic violence happens all over the world. But when she was a target and she thought her daughter's life was at risk, she went straight to the police, and the first people the police told was her partner. And at that point she came to this country for the third time, because she was a Commonwealth citizen and she'd already worked in our NHS system for several years. But at the point that she needed the support of our government, she was told that she was not wanted and that she had no right to seek asylum, because that is the brutality of the system. We might think by reading the news and the media, or what the politicians say, that Britain is somehow some sort of welcoming country, and that's why the government has to enact harsher policies, because so many people are coming here. It's simply not true. The numbers of refugees who have been fleeing wars, other forms of persecution, hasn't actually increased dramatically. What has increased is the number of people who've been forced to come to Britain by the least safe route, so under lorries or on small boats. And what our government has done, I read a statement by Boris Johnson earlier today, always enough to make you feel slightly nauseous, and he was claiming that this new Rwanda policy is as a deterrent against the he didn't say evil, but against people traffickers, and that the only way to stop people trafficking is by making the policy here one of deportation. Now, that's absolute rubbish, because if he cared about the lives of the men, women and children who have lost their lives at sea, then he wouldn't have enacted policies of pushing back those boats. When even the Royal Lifeboat Association becomes a force of the radical left, you know that our government has slipped further and further to the right. Because that charity, a great charity by the way, who just rescue people from the sea, that in the past when I was growing up, I remember going on beach holidays and being told in no uncertain terms not to go past a certain point in case I got washed out to sea. But then, you remember, anyone's been to the seaside and you go and visit the Lifeboat Association and you read the stories about the brave rescue missions. But you think they should be rescuing fishermen or surfers that have got a little overconfident, or swimmers. And now the Lifeboat Association is also rescuing migrants who are being fished out of the sea, because our government will not send support in order to look after those people's lives. So for the government to claim that their policies are humanitarian is just the most amazing doublespeak. I don't know if anyone's ever read the book 1984 by George Orwell, but I just wonder what he would say today at the level of doublespeak that this government has when they claim to be, have a history of democracy and support for human rights, while at the same time they're actively trying to get rid of the Human Rights Act. They're trying to clamp down on the rights of protest. All of these things are interlinked, and we need to, the only way to defend ourselves is to continue protesting and is to show solidarity. I think personally, I feel quite strongly in fact, that pity is not enough. Pity is part of the problem. The fact that when I used to work at a charity called Show Racism the Red Card, and we'd go into primary schools around the northeast of England, and there were children, this is not just in one primary school, I'm talking about in several primary schools, urban areas, rural areas. It was quite common for children, when shown a picture of a little black boy, to imagine that their hobby might be collecting water. And when you probed a bit further what that meant, where they'd learnt that, it was because of adverts they'd seen on television. They were being presented a certain view of Africa, essentially. Africa was a place of poverty. Africa is a continent with 64 countries that are very different from each other. Rwanda is one country with its own history, and it's got its own troubles. The current policy the government is enacting of sending people to Rwanda as if, you know, it's just a generic African country and what, they don't speak English so they'll get by there. I don't even know, maybe I should know, but I don't currently know what language is spoken in Rwanda. And I don't expect a Kurdish refugee to be able to speak the local languages in Rwanda either. This is pure and simple racism. And that pity that comes from a good place, people giving to charity, but I think it's also part of the problem, because if we look at some of these countries and why they're facing issues, like I had a really good comrade from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and he taught me so much about the economy in the DRC and about the mines where coltan and cadmium and other precious minerals are extracted, and they're not even sold by the Democratic Republic of Congo. They are smuggled into Rwanda and they're sold from Rwanda, even though Rwanda doesn't have those resources. And the war that has been raging there, you know, it's the biggest undocumented genocide. A few years ago it was over, I'm so bad with statistics, but it was millions of people, over 10 million people that had lost their lives in this conflict in Democratic Republic of Congo. And yet you don't hear anything about it. Why? Well, funnily enough, British companies have got some very profitable investments in the gold mines, the cadmium mines, the metals that are needed to make mobile phones such as this one. Now, we can't be puritanical. We need mobile phones, but we also need to change the system that makes mobile phones cause such poverty and human rights abuses in Democratic Republic of Congo and in Rwanda. These things are linked. So we cannot just view the rest of the world as being like, you know, a place of misery and suffering. When there's armed conflict, who do you think is selling the weapons to the opposing sides? When we hear about child soldiers, who do you think is profiting from that? When you hear about corrupt leaders in Africa, where do you think they keep their money? Because it's not under their bed. It's in British banking institutions. It's in the City of London. The City of London has been proven through numerous investigations to be the money laundering centre of the world. And this is disgraceful. This is something we should be ashamed of. What happens in these institutions, whether it's NatWest, HSBC, Barclays, on our high streets, the phones that we buy, the jewellery we buy, the flowers that we send to our loved ones, is absolutely linked to a system of imperialist capitalism where parts of the world are suffering super exploitation. So for the government to turn around and then deny people from those countries safe passage to Britain is hypocrisy of the highest level. We're here to say that no human is illegal, and we're going to round up this protest now, but it's not the end. We've got a signal group that has been started on this protest. If anyone doesn't know what Signal is, it's just a form of messaging service that you can download for free, and it's just not owned by Facebook. It's just called Signal, and we're going to talk about the possibility of starting an anti-raids network here in Nottingham. that won't just be, that's not that someone's going to organise it for us. It's going to be a meeting where we try and work out whether we've got the capacity to do this. What can we do here in Nottingham against this racist immigration regime? So, does anyone else want to use this open microphone? Shall we finish with some chants?
Yes.
That was a little lukewarm. Shall we finish with some chants? Okay. Can we just give a warm round of applause, because I'm sure everyone standing around who hasn't spoken will feel sympathy that it's really difficult to speak for your first time in a situation like that, but it makes it much easier if everyone's being supportive and giving a round of applause. So let's have a round of applause for someone brave enough to speak.
I'm probably going to forget everything I was going to say, but I just want to say this country, the Home Office and this government don't see these people, the refugees and migrants to this country, as people. Just today, the Home Office were forced to apologise for actually misreading their Rwanda safety report, and the human rights of these people being deported to Rwanda are at stake. I don't know what else to say. Yeah. Brick by brick, wall by wall, detention centres have to fall. Brick by brick, wall by wall, detention centres have to fall. Brick by brick, wall by wall, detention centres have to fall. No human is illegal.
So we've just got time for any announcements. The group I'm part of is organising an Education for Liberation discussion and action group, and we're going to be talking about an article about Rwanda on Thursday. That's at 5:30 at the Broadway Cinema. So please feel free to come. Does anyone have any other announcements about actions that could be taken, or want to say anything on behalf of any other groups or organisations? You want to say anything for Amnesty?
If anyone here goes to NTU, then come here.
Thank you everyone for coming. See you all again soon.